When Khalid Al-Marzouk pulled the trigger in the soundproof master suite, the wedding music was still playing 3 floors below, drowning out the single shot that ended his marriage just 47 minutes after the first kiss. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was the final, immediate execution of a man who understood that in his world, a secret double life was a financial and social liability punishable only by absolute finality. Before we dive into the deception that destroyed one of the Middle East's most powerful families, hit that subscribe button and join our channel for more exclusive true crime stories from the global elite. But let's go back to where it all began. The engagement was announced via a joint press release that ran simultaneously in London, Doha, and New York. No glossy magazine spread, no reality TV segment, just a precisely worded digital document confirming the union of the Al-Marzouk Group's heir, Khalid, and Layla Farouk, a highly sought-after senior analyst specializing in Middle East private equity. This was not a fairy tale. It was a merger. The Al-Marzouk name guaranteed unlimited capital and political leverage. Layla's name, though less entrenched in Gulf society, guaranteed intelligence, Western-honed sharp edges, and a clean, globally respected professional image that the old money often lacked. Layla navigated the Doha social scene with the calculated ease of a deep-sea diver moving through crushing pressure. Her movements were always deliberate, her words measured, her ambition thinly veiled by an impeccable wardrobe and a reserved, almost scholarly demeanor. She was 29, stunning, and unlike the society women Khalid usually dated, she did not look at him like a walking vault. She looked at him like a problem to be solved, a goal to be reached. This intrigued Khalid, a man who controlled everything he touched, from multi-billion-dollar real estate projects to the temperature of his morning coffee. Their courtship was brief, intense, and largely transactional. They met on a consulting project concerning a massive Qatari investment in German infrastructure. Khalid was impressed by her ruthlessness in negotiation. Layla was impressed by the sheer scale of the power he wielded without ever raising his voice. They had a shared language of strategy and control. The marriage, Khalid knew, would solidify his position against his ambitious older cousins. For Layla, it was the definitive end to a past she was desperate to bury, and the key to a future where she would never again have to answer to anyone. The stakes were impossibly high for both of them. 3 months before the wedding, the prenuptial agreement was signed in a sterile, windowless room in the Al-Marzouk corporate tower. The document, running to over 60 pages, detailed not just the division of assets, but also clauses governing public behavior, travel restrictions, and even a draconian reputation damage penalty. Layla signed without flinching. She insisted on a single, non-negotiable term. The Al-Marzouk family trust must immediately settle a $5 million debt for a legacy family investment fund she managed. Khalid's lawyer raised a skeptical eyebrow, but Khalid himself simply approved it. A drop in the ocean for him, and a small prize for the kind of fierce loyalty and public credibility Layla was bringing to the family. The massive financial transfer was executed within 48 hours. Layla watched the numbers change on her overseas account statement with an unnerving calm. That money was not for a family fund. That money was to silence a man who thought he still had a claim on her life and on her name. A man who was her husband. Layla's deception was not merely an affair or a quick cash grab. It was a meticulously constructed, parallel life. 3 years earlier, in a quiet civil ceremony in Cyprus, Layla Farouk had married Samir Ghanem, a Lebanese-American shipping logistics specialist. Their marriage was less about love and more about shared necessity and securing a critical U.S. visa for Layla at a time when her career demanded it. Samir, a volatile, desperate man buried under a mountain of business debt, saw Layla's rising profile in the Gulf as his final lifeline. He was the secret she was spending $5 million to erase. She believed the payment, routed through 3 separate offshore accounts, had severed the legal and financial tether forever. She believed Samir would disappear into the obscurity of the Eastern European shipping lanes he frequented. She was wrong. 2 weeks before the wedding, a secure, untraceable phone landed on Khalid Al-Marzouk's desk. It was an old-school Nokia, the kind intelligence agencies favored. It beeped. The screen showed a single, grainy photograph. Layla, in a simple white dress, standing beside a man with a heavy beard and nervous eyes, holding a Cyprus marriage certificate dated 2020. The name of the husband was clearly visible: Samir Ghanem. The air in Khalid's office, normally frigid from the relentless air conditioning, suddenly felt incandescent. This was not merely a breach of trust. It was a fundamental attack on the Al Marzouk name, a deliberate, calculated humiliation on a global scale. In Khalid's world, financial loss could be absorbed. Public dishonor was catastrophic. The $5 million had bought Layla 2 weeks of silence. But Samir, recognizing the true scale of Khalid's wealth, had cashed Layla's check and then doubled down. He was now demanding 10 times the amount from the groom, threatening to leak the full story to the international press on the morning of the wedding. Khalid did not panic. Panic was for small men. He put the Nokia in a lead-line safe and went back to approving the final design of the wedding reception hall. The music, the flowers, the guest list, all continued as planned. But in the hours leading up to the ceremony, Khalid did not see a bride-to-be. He saw a saboteur, a liability, and a debt that had to be paid in full. The wedding was no longer a merger. It was a trap, and only one of them would walk out of it alive. The day arrived. The ceremony was perfect, sterile, magnificent. Layla was a picture of controlled elegance, her eyes meeting Khalid's with what he now recognized as professional assurance, not love. They exchanged the vows, the rings, the 7-carat diamond feeling like a handcuff on her finger. The reception was a blur of high-stakes conversation and the clinking of champagne glasses. The final moments were ticking down. At 11:45 p.m., exactly 47 minutes after the symbolic cake cutting, Khalid gently took Layla's hand and guided her away from the roar of the party, up 3 silent, gold-plated elevator flights, to the isolation of the soundproof, ultra-luxurious master penthouse suite. The security detail remained outside the double doors. The music from below was a distant, muffled heartbeat. The moment of reckoning had arrived. The elevator doors hissed shut, leaving the chaos and engineered joy of the reception behind. The transition from the blinding lights and deafening music to the subdued, cavernous silence of the penthouse master suite was immediate and jarring. Layla smiled, a practiced, almost mechanical gesture, and moved toward the panoramic window overlooking the glittering skyline of Doha. Khalid did not follow her. He walked to the liquor cabinet, poured a shot of the prohibitively expensive amber liquid, and turned back to face her. His posture was rigid, devoid of the charming, easy authority he displayed downstairs. "We need to talk, Layla," he stated, his voice flat, stripped of all warmth. This was the voice of a CEO addressing a failed asset. Layla turned, the silk of her custom gown rustling against the marble floor. Her smile evaporated. She recognized a change in his tone immediately. She had been waiting for this moment, steeling herself for the inevitable confrontation, but she had expected it months later, perhaps over a complex business deal, not minutes after exchanging vows. "Talk about what, Khalid?" "The night is still young," she replied, her voice remaining perfectly even, a testament to her ruthless self-control. She took a step toward him, her hand instinctively going to the 7-carat diamond ring. Khalid took a slow sip of his drink, his eyes never leaving hers. They were cold, hard, and terrifyingly clear. "It's about the other ring, Layla. The one from Cyprus. The one you're still legally bound to." The air in the vast room froze. Layla's breath hitched, the only visible crack in her composure. Her mind raced, calculating the source, the leak, the cost. Samir. He had not only failed to disappear, but he had waited for the maximum point of leverage. I don't know what you're talking about," she lied, the words tasting like ash. It was a weak, reflexive denial, but she had to buy time. Khalid reached into his inner tuxedo pocket and pulled out the secure Nokia phone. He placed it gently on the polished mahogany bar top, then slid it toward her. The grainy photograph of her and Samir, taken 3 years ago, was magnified on the small screen. The Cyprus marriage certificate was legible, stamped, and terrifyingly authentic. "I know what I'm talking about, Layla. The document. The $5 million payment you insisted on. The family legacy fund, which was, in fact, your attempt to buy the silence of Samir Ghanem. He took the money, and then he asked for 10 times more from me this morning," Khalid said, his voice rising in volume, the control beginning to fracture. He threatened to deliver the full file to Al Jazeera during the wedding procession. Layla stared at the image, her facade finally cracking. The professional assurance was replaced by raw, paralyzing fear. This was not the man she married. This was the power she had severely underestimated. Khalid, please, it was a mistake. A desperate situation 3 years ago. It was purely transactional, a visa arrangement. I was going to fix it, annul it completely. It means nothing. It means everything, Khalid roared, slamming his empty glass onto the bar. The crystal did not shatter, but the sound echoed like a gunshot. It means dishonor. It means deceit on a scale that compromises my entire family's reputation. Do you understand the damage you have caused? Do you grasp what it means to enter the Al Marzouk family with a pre-existing legal and financial liability? You are not just ruining Layla Farouk. You are destroying 50 years of legacy. Layla retreated 2 steps. She realized there was no negotiation here, no corporate finesse that could fix this. This was not about love or trust. It was about the sanctity of the bloodline and the unblemished surface of their social image. She saw the rage, not the hot, blind rage of a jealous lover, but the cold, focused fury of a man betrayed in front of the entire world. I can fix it. I have the contacts. We can manage the narrative, claim coercion, claim fraud, Layla pleaded, clutching at the remnants of her analyst persona. Khalid laughed, a sure, bitter, terrifying sound. Manage the narrative? When the groom's second cousin already received the file this afternoon. It's done, Layla. The whispers have already started. The image of the Al Marzouk heir being fooled by a manipulative commoner is already being written into history. He moved toward her, his shadow enveloping her. You promised loyalty. You promised value. You promised cleanliness. You delivered a bomb. He reached out, his hand closing around her wrist, the one bearing the massive wedding diamond. His grip was not romantic. It was proprietary and brutal. Layla felt a surge of adrenaline, not just fear, but the sharp, clear panic of a hunted animal. The end was no longer a potential consequence. It was an imminent reality, sealed in the soundproof tomb of the penthouse suite. The only question now was how violent that end would be. The sound of the faint, joyful music from the party below only underscored the complete isolation of their final, terrible confrontation. Khalid's grip on Layla's wrist tightened, the 7-carat stone digging into her skin, a heavy symbol of the fraud he was now determined to erase. His face, usually a study in controlled composure, was a mask of cold fury. This was the true face of power when its foundation was threatened. Layla stopped struggling, her fear sharpening into a primal focus. She knew the language of high-stakes loss, and in his eyes, she was no longer a bride or even an adversary. She was a mistake requiring immediate, surgical correction. The money is nothing, Khalid hissed, his mouth millimeters from her ear. The $50 million I would lose on the upcoming IPO is nothing. But the humiliation, the absolute, irreversible stain on my father's name, is something I will not survive. And neither, Layla, will you. Layla didn't beg for her life. She argued for her utility. Khalid, stop. Think rationally. I can still control the narrative. We tell them Samir is a desperate fraudster, a failed attempt at blackmail. My network is solid. We have assets that can crush him. We had assets, Khalid corrected, his voice dangerously low. You are no longer an asset. You are a liability. A hole in the boat that will sink the entire fleet. He released her wrist abruptly, the heavy silence immediately returning to the suite. He moved toward a small safe concealed behind a Rothko painting. The silence gave Layla a fleeting, dangerous surge of hope. Was he retrieving documents? Money? A lawyer? He turned back. In his hand was a compact, heavy-caliber pistol, matte black and utterly efficient. It was not a showpiece. It was a tool, like the high-precision equipment he used in his construction sites. Layla's face went white, the color draining out so completely that her makeup stood out like crude paint. This was not part of the plan. This was irreversible. Colin, no. Think about the risk. The security logs, the investigations. The scandal will be 10 times worse than the divorce. Layla whispered, her analyst mind frantically calculating the variables of murder versus public shaming. The scandal of divorce, of a wife proven to be a common opportunist, is slow death for my family, Khalid stated, his eyes locked on hers, completely devoid of empathy. This, he lifted the pistol slightly, is an unfortunate incident. A tragedy. An unstable new bride who couldn't handle the pressure of marrying into the Al Marzouk legacy. He walked toward her slowly, methodically, closing the distance Layla was desperately trying to keep between them. My security detail is loyal. The evidence will point where I need it to point. My father owns the city, Layla. And now, I own your final moments. Layla stumbled back, hitting the edge of the vast, silk-draped bed. The sheets, pristine moments ago, felt cold beneath the thin silk of her dress. The reality of her situation hit her with paralyzing force. She had miscalculated the one element she thought she understood, the absolute, non-negotiable value of the family's reputation in this closed world. She had traded her life for the illusion of wealth, and the currency had just been recalled. As Khalid stood over her, the barrel of the gun was steady. He wasn't breathing heavily. He wasn't shaking. He was executing a complex, necessary maneuver. He was signing a final, deadly contract. Khalid, Layla pleaded one last time, her voice cracking. I'm pregnant. Khalid did not waver. The word pregnant hung in the air, a final, desperate gambit. But the lie came too late, and the man standing over her was too far gone into the cold logic of self-preservation. Layla saw his eyes flicker, not with doubt, but with the immediate calculation of the logistical nightmare that an unplanned heir would create. He raised the pistol, the polished steel of the barrel reflecting the cold light of the Doha skyline. The single gunshot was muffled by the suite's soundproofing, a dull thud swallowed by the heavy air and the thick, expensive walls. The wedding music playing 3 floors down continued its joyous, oblivious rhythm. On the bed, Layla Farouk's perfect, $1 million wedding dress was instantly and violently ruined. The great deception had just met its immediate, absolute finality. Khalid Al Marzouk stood over the body of his wife for a full minute, the smell of gunpowder mixing with the heavy scent of imported lilies. The diamond ring still gleamed on the lifeless hand, a monument to a secret that had lasted just 47 minutes too long. The next phase, the cleanup, the narrative control, was about to begin. The silence returned, heavier and more complete than before, broken only by the faint, insistent rhythm of the distant wedding band. Khalid Al Marzouk lowered the pistol slowly, the recoil barely registering through his custom-tailored jacket. He was not sweating. He felt a clinical detachment, the same focused precision he experienced when signing off on a high-risk demolition project. Layla's body, crumpled against the silk sheets, was now just a problem of logistics and optics. The priority shifted instantly. Control the scene, control the timeline, control the narrative. Khalid did not touch the body. He went to the bathroom, washed his hands and face meticulously, and checked his reflection. His eyes were cold, his posture straight. He looked like a man who had just concluded a difficult but necessary negotiation. He was the CEO of this crime scene. First, the weapon. He wiped the pistol down with a plush bath towel, removing any trace of his own skin oils, then placed it deliberately in Layla's lifeless hand, arranging her fingers around the grip. He smeared a small amount of residue from the barrel onto her wrist, attempting to mimic the visual trace of a discharge from close proximity. This was the final, brutal flourish of his planned tragedy. The unstable bride, overwhelmed by the grandeur and the pressure, taking her own life. The soundproofed room ensured no immediate witnesses, and the lack of a struggle simplified the narrative immensely. Next, the phone. The secure Nokia, still displaying the incriminating marriage certificate, was the greatest liability. Khalid picked it up, wiped it clean, and meticulously smashed it with a heavy crystal ashtray he'd used earlier. He scattered the fragments beneath the massive bed, knowing his loyal security team would find them later, but only after the initial, crucial hours of narrative establishment had passed. The official story would be that no one had contacted Layla. He glanced at his wristwatch, 11:58 p.m. He had less than an hour before the first major wave of guests would begin to leave, and his presence would be expected again. He moved to the double-door entrance, paused, took a deep, stabilizing breath, and walked out. The chief of his personal security detail, a former intelligence operative named Tariq, stood ramrod straight outside. Tariq was a man paid to see everything and report only what was necessary. His loyalty was guaranteed by 2 decades of service and a monthly salary that exceeded the annual income of most CEOs. Tariq, Khalid said, his voice calm, betraying no urgency. My wife is extremely distraught. The pressures of the day have overwhelmed her. She needs absolute privacy for the next 2 hours. No one, absolutely no one, is to disturb her. Do you understand? Tariq nodded once, his eyes confirming he not only understood the instruction, but also its necessary subtext. Understood, Mr. Almarzouk. Complete lockdown on the suite entrance. Khalid descended back to the reception, stepping back into the noise and the light. The transition was seamless. He approached the table where his father, the patriarch, was holding court. He smiled, accepted congratulations, and even engaged in a brief, cordial conversation about the price of crude oil. He was the perfect, triumphant groom, but his eyes were constantly tracking the clock, and his mind was calculating the minutes until the discovery. He made a point of greeting 3 of Doha's most influential media owners, ensuring he was seen, engaged, and visibly enjoying the pinnacle of his achievement. At 1:30 a.m., when the party was reaching its programmed crescendo, Khalid approached his brother-in-law, a physician, with a look of carefully constructed concern. I tried Layla. She won't answer her internal phone, Khalid said, pitching his voice just loud enough to be overheard by a senior executive from the police force who was also a guest. She locked herself in the suite hours ago. I am deeply concerned. She seems so fragile. The physician, instantly sensing the gravity beneath Khalid's calm exterior, went with him. Back in the elevator, Khalid casually mentioned to his brother-in-law that Layla had been under immense stress recently, even mentioning an unnamed financial burden she had been struggling to manage privately. The seeds of the narrative were planted. When they reached the suite, Tariq stepped aside. The moment of discovery was here. Khalid used a master key card, fumbling slightly for effect, before pushing the heavy door open. The atmosphere of the room, still thick with the scent of gunpowder, hit them first. Then, the sight of the body. Khalid let out a guttural, stage cry of horror, collapsing dramatically onto the floor just short of the bedside. The physician, trained to react, rushed forward. He saw the gun, the angle, the obvious conclusion. The physician's immediate reaction, driven by shock and the instinct to protect the family, was to confirm the apparent suicide. He immediately ordered Tariq to call the private family physician first, not the police, initiating the careful, controlled process of managing the tragedy. The official investigation was now starting exactly where Khalid had planned, with the assumption of self-inflicted death. The police report filed by the local precinct the morning after the tragedy was a masterpiece of political and social maneuvering. Layla Farouk, age 29, cause of death, self-inflicted gunshot wound. The statement released by the Almarzouk Group expressed profound grief, citing the immense pressure and fragile mental state Layla endured as a highly successful professional thrust into the unforgiving spotlight of the Gulf elite. The narrative was cemented, a tragic suicide. The world accepted the story. But the world was not the only audience. Captain Adnan Sharif of the Criminal Investigations Department was a man who understood the language of power, but who also possessed an inconvenient, almost pathological dedication to forensic detail. His initial review of the penthouse scene had raised subtle, almost invisible red flags, ignored by his superiors who preferred the convenient suicide conclusion. First, the gun. Layla was right-handed, yet the weapon was placed awkwardly in her left hand, and the grip was unnaturally loose. More critically, the single bullet casing was found lodged deep within the heavy pile of the carpet, several feet from the bed, an unlikely trajectory for a weapon fired at such close range, suggesting a deliberate alteration of the scene. Sharif also noted the immediate, almost hysterical insistence of the family to use their private pathologist before the official team arrived. And then there was Tariq, the head of security, who had been too calm, too precise in his testimony about the 2-hour isolation period Khalid had mandated. Tariq's loyalty was ironclad, but his body language spoke of practiced deception. Captain Sharif's team secretly re-examined the discarded fragments of the secure Nokia phone. Despite the extensive damage, a brilliant forensic technician managed to recover crucial metadata. The phone had not only received an incoming message, but had placed a single, 2-minute outgoing call less than an hour before Layla's death. The recipient was a prepaid burner phone traced back to an address in a low-rent district in Dubai, an address that had been vacated 3 weeks prior. Sharif knew a ghost when he saw one. The breakthrough came a week later, not from forensics, but from a quiet, internal bank audit ordered by Khalid's shrewd, older cousin, who saw the crisis as an opportunity to destabilize Khalid. The audit flagged the original $5 million transfer to Layla's legacy fund and, tracing its path further, discovered the final recipient, Samir Ghanem. The payment was traced just after Layla and Khalid had signed the prenuptial agreement. This established the financial motive for the blackmail and, more importantly, confirmed Layla's deep, active deception before the wedding. Sharif put the pieces together. Layla was blackmailed by her existing husband, Samir. Khalid discovered the double marriage, the ultimate public humiliation. He did not call his lawyers. He called his security. Then he executed the problem. The 2-minute call from the smashed Nokia? Not to Samir, but to Tariq, confirming the final plan. The police investigation was officially closed, citing the suicide finding. But Sharif initiated a covert, silent inquiry. He obtained a warrant based on the fraud angle, not the murder, focusing on Khalid's communication records for the hours leading up to the wedding. He was searching for the rehook moment, the definitive proof that Khalid was actively planning the elimination, not reacting in a moment of passion. Sharif found it, not in a phone call, but in a series of encrypted, time-stamped text messages between Khalid and his chief architect, sent 3 days before the wedding, concerning last-minute alterations to the master penthouse suite. The messages, disguised as construction notes, detailed the urgent need for Level 5 acoustic ceiling and internal air filtration system isolation on the master suite, specifically requesting completion by the morning of the wedding. Khalid had ordered the rooms soundproofed and sealed, not for privacy, but for containment. On a cool, silent afternoon, 2 weeks after the society wedding that became a murder, Captain Adnan Sharif walked past the imposing glass entrance of the Al Marzouk Group headquarters. He was accompanied by 2 uniformed officers, a discreet violation of every social and political rule in Doha. Khalid Al Marzouk, seated at his 50-foot mahogany desk, did not look up when they entered. He was signing documents, his composure intact, his world restored. Sharif placed the folder containing the texts, the ballistics report, and the bank transfers on the desk. "Mr. Al Marzouk," Sharif said, his voice quiet but carrying the absolute weight of the state. "The suicide file is closed. The murder investigation, however, has just opened. You created the perfect soundproof environment for a private execution. But you forgot one thing. Even in the world of unlimited power and wealth, architects keep records." Khalid slowly pushed the papers away, his meticulously constructed facade finally crumbling. The sudden, violent flicker of raw panic in his eyes confirmed everything. He was a man who planned for every outcome, except the survival of the truth. The final, absolute finality he had imposed on Layla was now irrevocably imposed upon him. The Al Marzouk empire was about to face a scandal that no money, no security detail, and no amount of political pressure could contain.